Ecuador is living in a nightmare. Hi there, everyone. It's Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English with stories about current events and trending topics. By listening to stories about the world, you also learn how to express your own ideas in English. We try not to spend too much time on negative stories, but this one is important. Ecuador is suffering an unspeakable bout of violence. Things have gotten much worse here in 2024, but the events of today have roots going back years. We'll explore that on today's story. In the second half of the audio lesson, I'll show you how to use the English expression fill a vacuum. This is Plain English lesson number 646, so that means JR has uploaded the full transcript and lesson resources to plainenglish.com/646. Let's get started. Anyone in Ecuador watching the news on January 9th got a horrific shock. El Noticiero is one of the country's most popular news programs. It's broadcast from a studio in Guayaquil, Ecuador's largest city. In the middle of the afternoon news, a group of masked gunmen burst into the studio and took control of the broadcast. The show's host, wearing a blazer and an open collar shirt, tried to calm the intruders and control the situation, even as a long-barreled rifle was pointed at his neck. If anything, the rifle was the least scary weapon the bandits brought. They waved machetes, machine guns, and even sticks of dynamite in front of the cameras. Camera operators and other studio crew were forced to the ground, and the whole horrific scene was broadcast live to a stunned country. This went on for 15 minutes of live television. Residents of Ecuador were shocked by what happened on TV, but many were not surprised. The country is living a drug-fueled nightmare. To understand what's going on today, you have to look back into recent history. The two leading producers of cocaine are Colombia and Peru. For decades, a separatist militant group called the FARC controlled cocaine trade in Colombia. But in 2016, the FARC and the Colombian government signed a peace agreement, and the group mostly disbanded. Colombia also strengthened security at its ports and reduced the volume of drugs leaving the country. So far, so good. But containing drug production and export in South America is like squeezing a balloon. If you reduce it in one place, it simply expands in a neighboring place. So when the FARC disbanded in Colombia, the world's drug smugglers spotted an opportunity, and that opportunity was called Ecuador. Ecuador is a small country sandwiched between Colombia and Peru, and it has a major Pacific port. Gangs from Mexico, which supply North America, and from Albania, which supply Europe, stepped in to fill the vacuum left in Colombia, and they stepped into a hospitable environment. a former president of Ecuador dismantled much of his country's anti-drug infrastructure. He forced the U.S. to close a military base near the coast. He reduced cooperation with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, and he broke up a special Ecuadorian police unit aimed at stopping narcotics trade. So when foreign drug gangs forced their way into Ecuador, they were pushing on an open door. The result is shocking. For much of recent history, Ecuador had been one of the safest countries in the Americas. The number of homicides per 100,000 people is a crude but useful measure of violence. For many years, Ecuador's homicide rate was the same as that of the United States. Now, it's 7 times higher, making Ecuador the second most dangerous country in Latin America. The government has started to fight back. 35-year-old Daniel Noboa took over as president in late November. And since then, the government has gone on the offensive. In late December, the country's top prosecutor announced a major investigation into organized crime within the government. 31 people were arrested, including high-ranking current and former officials. The National Assembly approved additional powers for the military, and uniformed officers started patrolling the streets. Early this year, Noboa proposed a nationwide referendum that would ask citizens to approve even more powers for the armed forces. And Noboa also announced 3 locations for new maximum security prisons. The message was not lost on anyone. Gang members started responding in turn, escalating the cycle of violence. The country's top prosecutor said organized crime had planned to assassinate her. On January 7th, a notorious gangster escaped from prison. As news spread through Ecuador's prisons, emboldened inmates started taking prison guards hostage and killing them. Outside prison, gangsters set off bombs in the street, kidnapped university students, and burned cars. And then they took over the TV news. Noboa declared a state of emergency and imposed a nationwide curfew. Everyone must be off the streets between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. He declared an internal armed conflict with the drug gangs. The state of emergency will last at least until March. In the meantime, every aspect of daily life is affected by the security situation. Nature reserves and parks are closed until further notice. Tourism has plummeted. Retirees and expats are scrambling to move out of the country, as once peaceful beach towns have become epicenters of drug smuggling and violence. Ordinary Ecuadorians are terrified. Many have no idea how this could possibly have happened to their small, peaceful country. Normally busy streets are empty. Schools and universities moved to online classes for the protection of their students. Scientists had to cancel field work in this country rich in biodiversity. Parents are searching for ways to talk to their kids about what's happening and why they see soldiers on the streets. I read Ecuadorian newspapers online over a few days to prep this story. Easily 2/3, if not 3/4 of the news is about the security situation. The saddest thing to me is to read the comments under YouTube videos and newspaper articles. Everyone just says, "Pray for Ecuador." The more time I spend in and learning about Latin America, the more I realize that the rich world's insatiable appetite for illegal drugs drives so many of this region's problems. What a tragedy. This is always a risk for me talking about science, but we'll give it a try. Fill the vacuum. It's not a scientific term per se, but it's based on a scientific term. A vacuum is a space with no matter. Air has molecules. Molecules are matter. So oxygen, nitrogen, whatever. So if you're sitting in a perfectly empty room, it's still not a vacuum because there's air. If there's a vacuum on Earth, like in a laboratory, and if you open it up, air rushes in because there's a difference in pressure. Now, true vacuums are rare. Anyway, the expression fill the vacuum means to occupy a space or a role that has been left empty by someone or something else. Now, like many expressions, this isn't literal. It isn't exactly like air rushing into a real physical vacuum, but it's still helpful to picture this in your mind. Anytime there's an opening, anytime someone has left a space or opportunity empty, someone else can come in and fill the vacuum. Here's an example from business. A lot of major grocery chains in the US have closed store locations in unprofitable areas. But the people left in those areas still need to eat. So dollar stores have come in to fill the vacuum. Dollar stores are smaller, cheaper, but they offer less healthy food. They are not ideal, but people need somewhere to shop close to home, especially if they work long hours and care for children. So grocery stores left a vacuum. They left an empty space in the market. And dollar stores, for better or for worse, often fill the vacuum. They see an empty spot and then they take the opportunity. They fill the space left empty by others. A sad fact about Latin America is that the drug trade is a big business. The soil and altitude in the Andes Mountains are perfect for growing coca, the raw ingredient in cocaine. And consumers in North America, Australia, and Europe have a voracious appetite for illegal drugs. It seems like every time there's a success in one place, another place suffers a setback. And so it has been with Ecuador. Colombia negotiated a peace with its biggest gangs and increased security at its ports. The biggest gangs disbanded, but that left a vacuum. That left an opportunity for other gangs to step in and take over. And so gangs from Mexico and Albania filled the vacuum and set up shop in Ecuador. A person can leave a vacuum too if someone is a strong leader and has a lot of power, and if that person retires, leaves the business, or goes to jail, then there can be a space, an opening, an opportunity for someone else. That's often called a leadership vacuum. You can ask, who will step up and be the new leader? Who will fill the leadership vacuum? The biggest cryptocurrency exchange was FTX. The CEO of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, was convicted of fraud and is going to jail. After FTX's collapse, the biggest cryptocurrency exchange was Binance. The CEO of Binance, Changpeng Zhao, pleaded guilty to money laundering. He might go to jail. So the two most famous leaders in crypto have been toppled. Who will fill the leadership vacuum? We'll have to wait and see. A few more quick examples for you. When Russia invaded Ukraine almost 2 years ago, many foreign companies shut their operations in Russia. That included the big car makers like Renault, Nissan, and Mercedes. Chinese car makers filled the vacuum. They took the opportunity. When the COVID-19 pandemic shut down live events, many fans couldn't watch their favorite sports games, plays, or concerts. So streaming companies stepped in to fill the vacuum, and they had some record years. And that's all for us at Plain English today. I was struggling with this one. It's not easy to find examples of fill a vacuum that don't have to do with war or depressing topics. Anyway, we made it, you and I together. And JR too. Don't forget, JR helps us every week. He edits the audio, uploads everything to your favorite platforms. He makes sure the transcripts are on plainenglish.com for all of you to enjoy for free. Today's transcript is at plainenglish.com/646, and we'll be back on Thursday with a new lesson. See you then.